Every mum I know is carrying something, a moment that she wishes she could take back, a time when she lost it, the voice that she used in that moment, the words that came out, and then the look on her child's face afterwards. And then the guilt. Oh, the guilt. In this episode, I hand the mic over to Tove as our host, and we are chatting about something that every parent needs to hear, and that most parenting content never quite gives you permission to believe. The magic of parenting is not in the perfect moments. It's in what happens after you get it wrong. So these are the three things that will change how you see yourself as a parent. The first thing is, the science shows that attuned parents only get it right a certain percentage of the time, and that's actually good enough. So in this episode, we talk about what is that percentage? How often do you actually have to get it right? How often do you have to be the good enough parent? The second thing we talk about is the still face experiment. It's one of the most powerful pieces of research in child development. And it shows that it is not rupture that shapes your child, it is repair. And we talk about how to come back, and how when you come back, you actually write a neurological story for your child that they are safe and that disconnection is not forever. And we talk all around that. And then finally, we talk about perfect parenting. I mean, could this actually be the gold standard or not? Could perfect parenting actually be harmful to your child? Well, that's something we unpack. We talk about the mess and the frustration and how coming back is the magic. But you are going to want to hear this for yourself. So if you are walking around with moments of guilt right now, then this episode's for you. So please do hit play and do share this with a parent who needs to hear it today. Welcome to Sense by Meg Faure, where we make sense of the science and art of parenting. Parenting is grey, gritty, and beautiful all at once. And my life's work as a healthcare professional is helping parents feel more confident in a season that can feel really overwhelming. In each episode, we share honest conversations with real mums, dive into the science with experts, and simply make sense of it all in practical ways. This is your space. You're not alone, you're held. So let's unpack the journey of a lifetime with sense.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Sense by Meg Faure, Real Life Parenting. I'm Tove, a mum of 3, and honestly, today's conversation feels deeply personal to me, because if there's one thing I've learned in motherhood, it's that parenting is not made up of the perfect moments. It's made up of ruptures and repairs. As a mom of 3, I've lost my patience. I've snapped when I'm overwhelmed. I've said things I wish I could take back. I've had moments where I feel completely depleted, distracted, touched out, and deeply unsure of myself. And I know I'm not alone in that. So many parents are carrying this around in the quiet belief that if they get it wrong, if we lose it, if we disconnect for a moment, we're somehow damaging our children. That good parents stay calm all the time, and that the endless patience, emotional availability, and never reactive. But that's just not real life. And today I'm sitting down with Meg to talk about something I think every parent needs permission to understand, and that is the magic of rupture and repair. And the magic is in the repair. So what actually happens to those moments after disconnect? What does science tell us about repair and resilience and attachment? And how can we stop seeing ourselves as failing parents every time we get it wrong? This is one of the most freeing conversations I've had as a parent, and I hope it gives you the same sense of relief as it gave me. So Meg, I'm very excited to be here. I wanted to start off with so many mums who feel like they're failing because they just can't stay calm. I'm definitely one of them, particularly after a long day of work. I'm not consistent. I can't be the parent I wish I could be. And where does this pressure come from?
Oh, Tove, I'm fully in your camp as well. I mean, I often look back on my life as a mom as well, and just I can pick up moments where I was like, oh, I wish I had just not reacted like that. But the reality is that we are human, and so we can't be perfect. And actually, we're going to talk about that today. There's a lot of magic in the fact that we're not perfect, and we'll definitely go into that. But, to answer your question about where does this kind of preconception or this myth come of being a perfect parent, where is this from? I think there are a couple of things that drive it. The one is that we're not growing up in villages anymore. So, kind of 150, 200 years ago, you would have grown up in a very real world where your mother lost her cool with your sibling and then had to repair it afterwards and had to deal with it. And, where your father was completely absent for 3 days because he was gone off on a hunt or whatever it was, or, where you actually had the reality of the world, just of real life, just happening to children. And so you would see that and you would go, okay, so that's my neurological model. That's my model for parenting. The problem is now that our models for parenting are built on parenting advisors and social media largely. And parenting advisors, of which, the irony is not lost on me that I do sit in that camp. But the reality is that they're not in your house all the time. They're not the person who's driving your day. And so what they will do, and what I've always done in my books, is put out the gold standard, understanding fully that the gold standard is not where people are going to land. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that we've got this kind of gold standard of what we should be doing that's delivered to us by people who are not living in our home and they're not in our village, first thing. And then add a worse layer to that, and that is that socially curated information, in other words, information from people from whom we identify on TikTok and Instagram and so on, is they will only show you the stuff they want you to see. They don't show you themselves losing their cool at 5 o'clock in the afternoon after a long day's work. And so when we see moms setting up wonderful little play structures for their children, or parenting their child with insight, or showing those beautiful romantic moments of whatever, the reality is that we're seeing a tiny little snapshot of their day. And it's on that perfect parenting advice and science, and on the back of snippets of people's lives, that we build our model. And we go, okay, well, that's perfect. That's what I've got to aspire to. And what adds a worse layer to that is that you get people who are misinformed, ill-informed, putting information on social media that creates an enormous amount of guilt. So an example of which is if you let your baby cry for more than 1 minute, they're going to be damaged for the whole of their lives. They've got this stress response, this cortisol, like they're definitely never going to be able to hold down a relationship afterwards, type thing. So we have these incredible standards and actually largely misinformation put out by people who are in fact not scientists, because any scientist will never say to you, if your baby cries for 1 minute, they're going to be damaged for the rest of their life, so because that science won't say that. Or controlled crying will damage your child, forever. And so they put out these kind of, if you don't breastfeed, you won't bond, whatever it is, these ridiculous statements around parenting perfection. So you kind of got the camp of the scientists, the camp of the social media, and then the camp of the people who are completely misinformed. And that's the basis on which we build our model for parenting. And for you and I, both of whom hold ourselves and everybody around us to very high standards, we don't hit those standards. And so we have this incredible guilt and this remorse and this sense of our failure, because we haven't hit this incredible standard. And I think what's very important in our conversation today is to understand that if we were able to parent perfectly, would that actually be okay for our kids? And why is it that actually that's not the best thing? And I think that is very liberating for parents when they start to understand that perfection is not the goal, in fact.
Absolutely. And this term rupture and repair is used all the time. Can you explain what it means, what is meant by rupture? Because I think some moms hear that word and immediately assume it's something very dramatic, because it sounds very dramatic. So what is it, and what do we do with that?
Yeah, so rupture, as we know, if we just look it up in the dictionary, will mean something like break. It's a break in a relationship. And I think it's important to recognize that rupture, and I'm going to couch this, I understand that this will incite some guilt in parents, but we do need to understand that rupture can be very damaging for all of us. So what happens when we have rupture, and so when something goes wrong, so when we don't parent like we want to, so we scream like a banshee, we lose our cool with our kids, we neglect them for 5 minutes because they're a newborn baby, they're crying, and we still got to change our toddler's nappy who's about to smear it all over the walls. That baby, that 2-week-old baby's got to get on with it, even if they're crying, because we've got other stuff happening in our household. So to understand that when life happens, there will be rupture. There will be breaks in perfect parenting, okay? And there really isn't such thing as perfect parenting, but in the ideal. So if we think that the ideal is consistent responses, human engagement, eye contact, beautiful moments of serve and return, reading our baby's signals. So let's say all of that constitutes really, let's call it good parenting, and understand that we're putting this in a context of real life. When we don't do that, we have ruptured in some way. So we have created a break in that connection. So we didn't read their signals. We didn't get to them quickly enough. We lost our cool. We were human. We ignored them, whatever it was. Okay. What happens for the baby in that rupture is important to understand. And that is that it does elicit a stress response in the baby. So there's a little bit of cortisol. And they don't feel good. Okay, so in those moments, the child's nervous system registers that there is a break and that there's a problem, and immediately, because they are so tuned to the emotional state of their caregiver, they read the micro expressions. They understand that the tone is not a good one, that the bodily cues are not what they need to have. And in that moment, the attunement from the parent actually breaks. And when that happens, a baby's stress response activates. And that's things like cortisol rising. Their tolerance for the world disintegrates. They can't self-regulate. In fact, they become dysregulated. And an example of that is that they might lose muscle tones. They fall on the floor, or they start to kick their feet because they're so unhappy, or they start to cry. So we do see this, or even they just walk away and are silent and turn away. And so in these moments, these babies and toddlers are really feeling it. So we need to understand that rupture elicits something in babies that is very unpleasant for them. And I think one of the best examples that was ever recorded as a video was actually Ed Tronick's still face experiments. And I'd like to just dip into that as an illustration of what rupture looks like. So in these experiments, Ed Tronick, who's an incredible scientist, he's still alive now, and he brings a mom and a baby, a beautifully attuned mom and baby, into a research room. And they have a video on the mom's face and they have a video on the baby's face. And the instruction to the mom is interact with your baby as you normally would. And you see this beautiful engagement between the mom and the baby, the serve and return. Baby makes a noise, mom makes it back. Baby's making eye contact, mom's making eye contact. Baby laughs, mom reciprocates. And so you've got this beautiful attunement. Mom reads the baby's signals. The baby tries to get the mom's attention. The mom attends to the baby. It's beautiful. It's perfect. And then the scientist says, Mom, you've got to look away. And when you look back, your face is deadpan. There is no emotion and you do not respond to your baby. Now, in a split second, because you're watching these videos, and moms, you can go and have a look at it on YouTube, the baby registers this. You see it in less than a split second. There's an immediate, the baby immediately notices that the mom's face is deadpan. And then the baby tries to elicit a laugh or elicit a serve and return from the mom, makes a noise and expects the moms to respond. And the mom's deadpan and doesn't make a single movement. She just stares at her baby. And it is incredible, Tove. Within about 15 seconds, the baby starts to cry and fuss, arch their back. And within 30 seconds, the baby is fully dysregulated. They're arching their back, they're screaming, they're in full distress. And that illustrates for us what's happening in that moment of rupture, where what the baby expected was not met by the parent. It was inconsistent. And then the baby didn't just experience stress, it fully disintegrated into dysregulation. So the baby could not manage its state, its body posture, its mood, its anything. It was fully dysregulated. And that's really what rupture looks like. And it happens in everyday moments when we forget to respond to our baby, when we can't respond fast enough. So these ruptures happen all the time, okay? And when I'm articulating it to you, it must feel very disturbing, because actually we all know this isn't what we think we should be doing. And that is rupture.
And can I ask, is there a difference between how rupture presents itself across babies and toddlers? And is that a different thing? Because obviously with toddlers, there's a lot more, it's a different serve and return, right? It's not necessarily, it's verbal. They'll say no, or they'll, I guess when we move into repair, do you handle them differently, but also are they experienced differently?
So look, I think for the very little, so every age group, if we take it from newborn to adult, even to adulthood, to 25 years old, which is actually we need to understand we're parenting until our children are full adults. In each stage, there's a different expectation and a different need from the developing brain and the emotional brain. So like a little baby, a 3-week-old, they need, when they're needing you and when they're looking for a response, it's like instantaneous. It's very attuned to their body language. It's reading their signals. It's actually a lot of work, in fact. So, them just looking at you, looking back at them just making a sound, you make your sound back, them feeling a bit dysregulated and fussy. You have to do all the work for calming them. You don't have to do the same, obviously, for your 15-year-old child, So yes, it does look different. And so rupture will look different. Rupture for a very little one can be just not getting there within 3 minutes, like they were expecting you to be there very quickly. Rupture for a toddler is often experienced as, somebody not meeting their physical needs as they need it in that moment, or ignoring them when they're trying to speak to them, or across the board from newborn through to 25 years old. In fact, to my age, everybody experiences rupture when somebody's head goes into a cell phone, as an example. Like, that's rupture, because you were there with me. You were my person. You were your brain was in my brain. And the minute your head goes into a cell phone, there is a rupture. You have disappeared for that moment. And so not being attuned across all age bands would be the same, but the attunement that is needed and the way in which we do that looks slightly different.
So what does research actually say about repair? Because I think this is where a lot of parents have never really been given kind of permission to understand that repair is something that happens and actually has value in our kids' development.
And that's where the magic lies. So I only told you half of Ed Tronick's still face experiment. So what happens in Ed Tronick's still face experiment is we've got this baby who's very dysregulated. And then the mom looks away again. And when she comes back, she connects with her baby completely. And so she touches her baby and she looks at its eye contact and she talks to it and she says, "I'm so sorry, I was here, but I wasn't talking to you." She gives that back. And instantaneously the baby is re-regulated again. And I think, what Ed Tronick's still face experiment taught us is that it's not the rupture itself that determines the outcome. It's actually what happens next. The developing brain actually does not look for perfection. In fact, it's interested in imperfection. And there's overwhelming evidence that all of the beautiful learnings that happen in life happen in the next stage, which is the repair or the restoration. And so when the mom comes back and reattunes and repairs, they are writing a neurological story for their baby that relationships are safe, that disconnection happens and is temporary, and that a person who loves you will always find their way back to you. And that is magical. That is magical because it tells me that actually that's going to be my model for life. Because you've got to remember that your child and as much, it's a right and weaning sense that the biggest conundrum of early parenting is that you want your little ones to stay little forever, but you are building them every day for full independence to leave you. And that's the reality of parenting, is we are building a human who has to stand outside of us. That's what we're doing, even when we want them to stay little forever. But that building of somebody who has to leave you means that you have to prepare them for a world that is imperfect, a world that will let them down, a relationship that will fracture, a boss who will be unfair. The world we're preparing our children for is not perfect. And so if we keep things perfect, we're not creating the magic for learning. And so what happens is when we make a mistake, when we rupture, the magical stuff that actually happens doesn't happen in the rupture. Clearly, we're not going to go out there and try and rupture at every opportunity. The magic happens in the repair, that you're saying to your child, you know what, it doesn't matter, I still love you and I'm still here and I'm human and I stuff up. And when you stuff up one day, when you're 15 years old and you completely lose it with me, I'll still love you afterwards because you've seen me do it with you. You've seen me make a mistake, come back and repair. So this repair piece it's not just, in fact, the word repair might actually be wrong, because the word repair means that we're going back to where we were before. We're not. We're going into an even better place because our little ones have learned from that, had an opportunity to learn from that experience and know that they're still loved and that you still love them after that.
So what we're basically saying is that you're not just fixing what went wrong, we're actually developing our children.
Yeah, we're building. We are building. We're not just going back.
So, I mean, I feel like that's like a massive weight off in many respects for parents, because as you said, I think we can't control the fact that we are always going to rupture. There is going to be, it is just going to happen. And so if we can see it as the repair, as actually building our children, I think that really changes the messaging. Practically, what does a good repair look like?
Today's dose of sense is brought to you by Parent Sense, the expert-based parenting app that gives you daily support from pregnancy to sleep, feeding, and daily routines. Take the guesswork out of parenting. Download Parent Sense today and use the code SENSE50 for 50% off.
Practically, what does a good repair look like?
So I think that's the important thing. Repair is not like, and you will have potentially times in history or even now where a parent is abusive and thinks that, if I'm abusive to my child and I say sorry, then it's all fine. And of course, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about somebody who can just be a repeat offender and say, well, this is actually really beneficial for my child. They're learning from the repair piece. That's really not what it is about. It's very important to understand that. And I would encourage parents to hold the gold standard, like we all do, and to go, this is what I want to do, to understand that they are going to fail because they are human and forgive themselves, and then move into this position of repair. So what does repair look like? So repair is really a reconnection. So it's first of all coming back. So returning to the child would be the first step. So, and when I say return, it can be as simple as eye contact again, touching them again, reconnecting emotionally again. And there's this incredible it's not even a theory. It's been seen in science where they've had electrodes on brains to see the brain, which areas the brain light up. And when a mother and a child are attuned and are in love and are looking at each other and connecting, there is a pathway in the brain that we now call mirror neurons or mirror pathways that actually lights up. The same pathway lights up for both mother and child or father and child. And it's a reflection that your brains are in sync. So when we say come back, it's about not just re-entering the room, it's about re-entering the human mind, becoming mindful of your child and understanding their state. And so coming back and touching them. So now they've thrown themselves on the floor, they're throwing a temper tantrum, you've lost it, they've lost it. It's coming back and holding them and making eye contact and coming back to them. So that's the first thing. It's just really coming back. And when you come back to somebody, they feel it instantly. I mean, go and watch the Tronick video. You don't have to say a word. You're back and they know you're back. The next thing that does need to happen is that you need to name it. And I think, this is something that I thankfully read very early on in my parenting journey with my children. And that was one of the greatest gifts you can give your child is to say sorry. And I think there's an old-fashioned style of parenting, and maybe it's authoritarian parenting where I'm always the boss, I'm always right, so I'll never acknowledge failure. And actually, when we come back and we name it and we say, sorry, we are acknowledging that we have failed. And so I think that's very important, and say, I'm so sorry, my baby. I am so tired, and so give your little one the context for how you failed. I think, I can remember back because Tove, a number of times I've failed with my children. I can't count on my hands and feet, but I can remember once my son was very, very little. I think he was just verbal, and I had lost my cool and I'd smacked him, and I felt terrible about it. And he looked at me, and before I felt terrible, he said, "Mommy is naughty." And in that moment, he called me back, and he made me accountable. And he was spot on. And it was the fact that I had raised my hand to my child and that I'd done it in anger. And it's not a parenting moment I'm proud of. Thank goodness the parenting police are not going to come for me now, I hope. But, I failed.
We'll beat that one out.
I failed and I knew it. And immediately when he called me out on it and said, "Mommy is naughty," I returned to him and said, "You're 100% right. You are right. Mommy should not have done that." And so I think naming it becomes something that's very important when you fail. And the reason is that it also frames for them that when they fail, they can come back and say sorry and be forgiven, that becomes their model. And then, of course, step number 3 would be, so step number 1 is come back. Step number 2 is name it. Step number 3 is reconnect. And again, that is a touch, a look, a moment of warmth, let's read a book together. So, I'm tired. I can't play XYZ with you, but I can sit and I can read a book with you. And, so try and find something that you have the capacity for in that moment and give it back to them. Okay. And then finally, step number 4, don't over apologize and don't over explain. And I think that is important, that a single apology of, "I stuffed up, I'm really sorry, let's go and read a book together," that is good enough. You don't have to go down the road of, well, I need to just tell you that in the context of my parenting that I got from my parents, and the day that I've had, and the fact that actually I'm the boss and you're not, and you don't need to go down that road. It's simple, it's reconnect, and then and spend a little time, and time. I love Gary Chapman's work on the love languages, and I definitely, my love language is time. And so for me, it's a reconnection. It's putting down the cell phone, it's sitting on a couch and then saying, right, come, let's talk now, and let's reconnect.
And Meg, something that you mentioned earlier was, what is the impact of the perfect parent? Right. So I that's a really interesting piece, because it's a gold standard and we're all working towards it. But if there was the perfect parent, what would that actually, considering we've now unpacked the value of repair for our kids, what is the perfect parent actually yield in a child?
So today we do see shades of that. It does exist. And I'm going to talk you through 3 scenarios where it does exist. So the first scenario is in the situation of an only child, where there is a parent who is fully on tap, fully with that child, fully focused, following every rule book about making their child's life as perfect as possible, and there is no sibling. So we're gonna hold that scenario, that as one scenario. We're going to hold another scenario, which are parenting theories that come and go. They always get labeled as different things. Sometimes they're labeled as attachment parenting. Sometimes they're labeled as gentle parenting. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. There is a style of parenting, I've heard it recently called as lawnmower parents, who kind of mow the lawn ahead of their child so things are absolutely perfect for their child and there's no disruptions or frustrations in their life. So your lawnmower parents, your attachment parents, and I'm not saying attachment parenting is necessarily a bad thing, but I think taken to the extreme, creating a perfect world in which there are no frustrations, you never say no to your child, and everything goes your child's way, would be scenario number 2. And then taking it completely to dystopian world, and an example would be, which I think is going to come in time to come, is the perfect AI parent, a soft Maslow-style soft teddy bear who actually has an AI inside of them, who never makes a mistake. So robot parent who never makes a mistake. The nanny who always parents according to the psychological science, who always gives wonderful feedback to the child, who always make sure the child has got everything and has the right responses, never loses their cool. So you can imagine each of these different scenarios, 2 of which actually exist in the world, and 1 of which is probably going to be a reality in the future. Now, each of those, you could look at those and you could say, oh, that child is so lucky. They've got like the perfect parent. But the reality is that the lessons that child doesn't learn in those moments can be very damaging. And we see it with firstborn or only children who go from this perfect environment into a play school, into grade R or grade 1, and suddenly they've got to navigate other children who are just going to pull their hair and take their toys and frustrate them. And they literally don't know what to do with that because they've never had it any other way. Or the child who's had this incredible lawnmower parenting, no frustrations in their life, nobody's ever said no to them, they can never go wrong. The whole house is catered around them having, full opportunity for exploration and never being frustrated. When they get to be 10 years old and they are faced with the frustration of making the C team in football, like that's going to be devastating, because how could they, the most perfect human in the world, not make the A team? And this is a reality, unfortunately, for children nowadays, is that they get to these situations, and these situations are frustrating. They're not perfect. As hard as they may try, they don't make the A team, and they do not have the resilience and the coping strategies to be able to deal with frustrations. And then the last scenario, which is this perfect nanny parent, this AI parent, they will never be able to hold down a relationship, because real relationships, a boyfriend and a girlfriend and a fiance and a husband and wife, they stuff up all the time. They are messy. Your relationship is messy. It's untidy, and it is never perfect. And the problem is that if you hit 25 years old and you are dating somebody and you look at them and you go, well, there are these tiny imperfections that I don't know that I can live with. The reality is you're probably going to end up on the shelf and never get married, because you're not going to find that person who can meet your requirements. So when you look at all of those different scenarios, I think it's quite obvious that a perfect scenario is very, very damaging, and that an imperfect scenario and these ruptures and repairs are the things that actually make up perfect parenting. And so there was a researcher, a theorist called Donald Winnicott, and he speaks about the good enough parent. And the good enough parent stuffs up enough times that the child knows that the world is going to fail them, and repairs sufficiently that the child can trust the next break, that it's not going to be forever. And I think that's what we're trying to build in our children. We're trying to build a world which is not perfect, but that repairs sufficiently that we can actually trust the next interaction. And where things do go wrong, and it does happen, and in attachment theory, we definitely see this, is where things are so consistently inconsistent and so terribly damaging. And it usually comes 9 out of 10 times, it'll come from a parent who has got some type of personality disorder or some sort of psychological problem themselves. And those children cannot attach later. And so they have insecure attachment or avoidant attachment. And those children, that's a different scenario. But your norm is that there will never be repair. And you don't know what's coming next. And so that's a whole nother level that I'm not really going to go into. But good enough parenting is I stuff up 70% of the time, I repair it every time I can, and only 30% of the time I'm actually doing a good job, and that's okay.
So with that being said, is guilt ever useful for parents?
I think guilt is the most wasted emotion. I don't think it's ever useful in any scenario, parenting or marriage or anything. Guilt doesn't change behavior. Guilt just makes you feel shitty. I think the things that are constructive are things that change behavior, which means that, yes, you need to have this kind of gold standard for yourself, and you need to accept that actually you're not going to hit it straight up front, and then be kind to yourself. I think guilt is a very unkind emotion, and it's really not constructive. So, I think you will feel it, obviously, and you will feel remorse. If you didn't feel remorse after you have had a rupture, you wouldn't be normal. Then that would be problematic. So if you've got somebody who harms someone and never feels remorse afterwards, I think that would be worrying. Then you've got a personality disorder that has problems for that child. So feeling remorse and feeling sadness with yourself and feeling like a real unsettledness that drives you to repair, that's healthy. Sitting with guilt for the next 15 years, like I do about the one time that I lost it with James or whatever, that I think that is not constructive. But you're not going to get away from it. So I can tell you that it's not constructive, but you'll still do it. So we're parents.
I was going to say, I feel like that's the nugget of wisdom to leave everyone with. So, I guess with that, thank you so much for your time, Meg. I honestly think that this conversation is something every parent needs to hear, because so many of us are walking around and carrying guilt from the moments we wish we'd handled differently. And definitely for me, I know these moments well. There's been a lot of repair in my house, lots of coming back and lots of trying again. And I think what matters most is not perfection, it's the connection, as you said, and it's showing our children that our relationship can survive these ruptures, that mistakes are human, and that love doesn't disappear when things get messy. So thank you so much, mums and dads, for joining us. Thank you for listening to Sense by Meg Faure, and please download the app, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope today's conversation brought you a little more clarity, calm, and confidence on your parenting journey. If you enjoyed the episode, please do share it with a friend who needs to hear it today, and also go and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss out on an episode. I'll be back next week with another episode, same time, same place, and always here to support you. And in the meantime, download the Parent Sense app to take the guesswork out of feeding, sleep, weaning, routines, and everything in between.